Good afternoon. Could not be more appreciative of you taking time to join us here for Noontime Knowledge Series for Penn State fundraising volunteers, presidential counselors, and the donors. My name is Jody Adams, and I am your host for today's conversation. To add the debt, I am a 1986 graduate of Penn State, and my current connection to the university is as the chapter for Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority, chapter advisor, I should say. Like many of us, I've been involved in numerous aspects of the Penn State community since graduating, including Greek life. Today, we have a number of speakers joining us from the Timothy Piazza Center for Fraternity and Sorority Research. I'll introduce them to you in a moment. You may enter questions, if you have any, in the chat box at any time, or feel free to use the raised hand feature after the presentation. I'm particularly excited to be a part of today's event, as Greek life was not only an important part of my own collegiate experience, but it was also an important part of my children's experiences at other universities. Without a doubt, Greek life continues to have an active role within the campus culture at Penn State, but also at over 800 college campuses. However, Penn State today is not my Penn State, and that's why I'm here hosting this event. Let me clarify. The prevention of alcohol and substance abuse is an issue I care deeply about. I have personally witnessed the damaging and lasting effects that such abuse can have on close friends and their families. This is also a prevalent concern for me in my role as advisor to a sorority that is currently recognized by and in good standing with the university. However, my experience as a young person is very different from our young person's experiences today. I believe our role as alumni is to not only demonstrate to a wider community our support and faith in Penn State as an educational institution, but it's also to demonstrate to the current collegians at Penn State what it means to be an active, productive, and thoughtful contributor to the university. Accomplishing such role is hard, and this is why I support the Piazza Center. The Piazza Center brings the experts and research into the discussion of best practices and helps us as advisors, us as alumni, us as parents, to better understand how to guide, mentor, and support young people when it comes to learning, leading, and preventing alcohol and substance abuse for a safer and stronger experience. This is just a quick introduction to my Penn State story, but now I'd love for you to meet the director of the Piazza Center. Steve Veldkamp is the executive director of the Piazza Center. He's held that role since 2019. Before assuming his role, Steve served Penn State as the interim director of fraternity and sorority life. He held professional roles at Indiana University, Bloomington, Western Michigan, and University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. Steve holds a doctorate in higher education from Indiana University, Bloomington. As always, it's great to have you with us, Steve. Steve, I pass it over to you.
Thank you, Jody. I am extremely excited to be here today, and I come to you as a parent. I come to you as a Greek member, a member of Sigma Phi Epsilon, a Greek advocate, as well as a researcher. So I wear all those hats as I come to you today. The Piazza Center's goals, and if we can move into some of our slide deck here, we can put those up. All right. So the center really has a couple of main facets. One is to affirm the relevance of fraternities and sororities, uncover the untold value that fraternity and sorority has. If you talk to any alum, they'll talk about their leadership skills and how their fraternities and sororities really help them live productive lives, and especially in business. So we're dedicated to uncovering that untold value. And we're leading a science-based prevention effort, the likes we have never seen before. And I'm extremely excited about this, especially in our partnership with our Prevention Research Center and our faculty in biobehavioral health. And then finally, we are land grant based. We are totally living into the idea that we're creating new knowledge and applying it to better our human condition and to better our campus communities across the country. So all of that total, let's also reflect on our beliefs of the center. Fraternities and sororities are transformational. They produce an immense amount of learning, and we're excited to really uncover that facet, feed it back to students, feed it back to our chapters, our communities, and really giving, I would say, fraternities and sororities their due recognition for the positive contributions that they're making in students' lives. Some of our goals is to amplify an investment in fraternities and sororities by our campus communities, by our alumni. These are valuable entities. And so with the right investment in human time and talent, like a Jody Adams, like a Steve Diorio, like so many, Earl Merritt, so many folks at Penn State that really invest so much in students' lives to help them become leaders, learning in their the rightful disciplines, and then also intervening in each other's lives and truly becoming each other's brothers and sisters keepers. So the experience contributes, again, to an immense amount of learning. The prevention efforts that we're engaged in is really a partnership with campuses, Penn State and campuses across the US to build out that prevention practice. We're reframing accountability as effective measurement of prevention. And then again, I've mentioned before, but this is the scope of our work is Penn State and over 800 campuses nationwide. So it's pretty big, and we have a lot of national partnerships already that we're pretty proud of. An end result of our work is trust. Trust in fraternities and sororities, that they're a positive contribution to our collegiate environments, and should be as such resourced in that fashion. So, our agenda, our applied research agenda, again, that practical approach, our land grant mission coming through here is to really look at, and again, 3 buckets for innovation in student development and learning, quality prevention practice, again, the likes that we have never seen before, and better accountability structures to support students, increasing relationships, not severing relationships. So that's my way to frame that. This project, the center has really embarked on a journey the last couple of years and getting some national experts to look at learning happening in the co-curricular. We've engaged them for about 3 years, and we just now, just this spring, actually just this month, have launched the project in partnership with the North American Interfraternity Conference. So we're extremely excited about this project. Surveys are literally in students' hands at Penn State right now. And it's also part of career readiness. It helps students reflect on their experience and helps them shine in their summer jobs, their internships, and as they're preparing for their careers. This is all rowing towards, and the document we have up here for the competencies of career readiness is from the National Collegiate Employers of the 8 things that collegiate employers are looking for. So it maps to those things as well. So. That's just a quick overview of the center. We're doing a few other projects that I'll start to also talk to you about. But Jody, that's a warm up. How about that for the center? So,
no, much appreciated, Steve. Great warm up. At this point, I think if you want to flip to the next slide. Yeah. Yes, I'm excited to be introducing Mary. Mary.
Oh yeah,
Mary
sorry.
is our current Penn State Panhellenic president. And I understand, and I actually heard this from my chapter president as well, that Steve recently attended sorority meetings and he presented. I'm very curious, and I'm sure our attendees are as well, is what was everybody's reaction to Steve's presentation? And I'd also like to hear your thoughts on how do you think that the Piazza Center will help Greek life?
Yes, well, hello everyone. As Jody mentioned, my name is Mary O'Connor and I currently serve as the Penn State Panhellenic Council president. So about a month and a half ago, Steve came and spoke at one of our bi-weekly presidents and delegates meetings where he gave his presentation on how the fraternity and sorority experience matters. And I will say I got wonderful feedback, especially from the chapter presidents after Steve's presentation. The student leaders present at the meeting really found the presentation to be one, eye-opening, and also the research to be extremely impactful. I think myself, along with the majority of the women in the Penn State Pan community, do not realize the impact that being a sister in a sorority and being a sorority leader has on us, as well as the important life skills and characteristics that we gain from the Greek life experience. So hearing that presentation was so eye-opening for everyone that was there. And the Piazza Center really seeks to highlight this like value of Greek life and the individual growth that comes from being a member of the Greek community. And I've had a couple conversations with Steve, and like as Panhellenic president, like have like gained so much and like the experiences and the skills that I've developed from it without like actually realizing I was developing it. So it was like really cool to hear that from Steve, and like know that like I am becoming a stronger leader and like a better person because of my experiences in Greek life. But when Steve wrapped up the presentation, probably for everybody that was in the room, like their whole world opened up, because they really realized, when they graduate and go on to apply to jobs, they can talk about a time that they supported a sister, or how they oversaw an exec board as a chapter president. And from there, they can talk about the skills and the competencies that they gained from those experiences and have the research to support it because of the Piazza Center. But I will say, like, when I have chapter presidents literally texting me after a meeting, like thanking me that we had someone come in and like speak to our community and saying they feel inspired and empowered, like I know they have like absolutely left an impact. So that was awesome. But yes, I 100% believe that this research will change Greek life for the better, especially because of the center's commitment to students and to Greek life.
Thank you, Mary. I couldn't agree more. And that's exactly the same type of feedback I got, which was actually unsolicited feedback from my president. We were just on our weekly chat, and she jumped right in. She's like, this guy named Steve, don't you? And I said, yes, I do. And I pretty much heard the same thing. So Steve,
Jody,
just in addition,
a lot of credit for our researchers, because I'm just basically parroting their work. And so a lot of folks are behind it. I think the other thing about my visit, I went to all 4 councils, and so I met and hung out with our NPHC community, our multicultural Greek community, and really connected, I would say, with all of our 4 councils. This project in particular is rooted in a very diverse, our diverse traditions of fraternities and sororities, and I just rattled off our 4 councils. There are a lot of proxy to race and ethnicity, and I'm very excited. Our lead professor for those that represent our NPHC organizations, and I'll show his profile picture here in a second, is a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And a lot of our scholars are also diverse in their representation of the different traditions of fraternities and sororities. So I just want to plug that opportunity here. So.
No, appreciate it. Can you maybe speak just a little bit more, a minute or two, about really how you see the research feeding right into creating safer organizations on campus, particularly with the Greek life?
Yeah, thank you, Jody. Our professor, this is going to be Dr. Rob Teresi's presentation for the next couple of slides, and unfortunately Rob had a family emergency and cannot be here. So I get to talk about Rob today, and he is a phenomenal professor in biobehavioral health and psychology. He has had an amazing career in research, cancer prevention research and hazardous drinking prevention research. He's been funded by MAD. He's won over $40 million in National Institutes of Health funding for Penn State, which is an incredible amount of resources that he's brought to the institution. And Rob has been generous with his time and really mentoring myself and mentoring our number of our researchers towards what prevention practice we can really build out to create safer fraternities and sorority communities. So I really owe so much to Rob. We owe so much to Rob and his brilliant work and his generosity of spirit. And so I just want to highlight Rob here. It's really a project that, like I said, is building out prevention practice, the likes that we haven't seen. We're building on research that's been done about 10 to 15 years ago, and we're refreshing that research. We're bringing it into the contemporary student experience. And as Jody mentioned, the perils of this fraternity, or this age of college students, is much different than 20 years ago, much different than 30 years ago. Drinking is different, the social experience is different. And so we need to resource it drastically different. This project is gaining some national attention, and I'll highlight that, including two of our sponsors. So Lambda Chi Alpha and Phi Gamma Delta fraternities have donated over $100,000 to the center, and they are earmarking this project as something that they think is going to create positive change across the U.S. So we're very excited about that. The project started 2 years ago. Well, it started longer in our conceptual stage, but we launched it 2 years ago with Penn State and 5 other campuses, some major campuses. And then we're growing a second cohort. Literally next week is our orientation meeting for 7 more campuses that are joining, a lot of big campuses, especially in the SEC. And the long-term goal and Rob's vision is, and he was recently, I was interviewing him about some development conversations, and he's like, I'm not going to take pride in this project until we get 80% of campuses across the United States involved in this conversation, which I'm hosting 13 campuses is an audacious for a young center. To think that we're going to be hosting 80% of campuses across the country in this prevention work is pretty daunting. But I believe it with Rob's background and his expertise here. So again, just as a wrap up with our prevention work, it is multifaceted. It is building out a comprehensive hazing prevention and hazardous drinking prevention work that really inspires more well-being within a fraternity and sorority community and campus-wide. And I should mention that we're targeting, because of we're pinpointing fraternities and sororities, but really this is really best practice work that is going to impact athletics. It's going to impact broader student organization, because students involve themselves, not just in fraternities and sororities and business fraternities and thon and all sorts of other activities. And so as our campuses get really good at prevention, it'll impact all of those things.
So true, Steve.
Yeah.
We'll let Steve take a breather, a quick pause. I also just want to remind our audience that please feel free to use the chat as a way to put your questions if they're right there on the tip of your tongue and you want to ask. But again, we're going to hold off to the end portion of our presentation. I do see some questions coming up. So again, for those that have added those, thank you very much. So now I'd like to introduce another Penn State student, Anders Shavinsky, who was very kind to join us today and is, I believe, coming to us live from State College, if I'm not mistaken. Andrew, are you out there?
Yep.
Okay, we will get you visually in there. Andrew, you're a biology student, but you are also on IFC. And I would love to know, as I'm sure our participants, your perspective on what the Piazza Center is doing and how this will be impactful. And also, what are the reactions from the fraternity leaders about the Piazza Centers and their proactive prevention?
Yeah. So first off, I'm the vice president of standards, as you can see. And through that, I'm always in contact with chapter presidents and any other really risk managers and other sort of safety-minded people are pretty often the guys that I'm working with. And one of the big things for the research study is that it takes in the student's voice, because that is a really big thing that fraternities at Penn State specifically within the IFC have felt, where they kind of feel like they've been excluded or decisions have been made about them without consulting them. And the research and the study does a really good job of bringing them into the decisions that are getting made. So it's all based off of data that's collected from the students that will then go into impacting the students. It's not something that just kind of gets from a fraternity president standpoint where they see, oh, a new policy's coming in. Now they know that, hey, we had a say in that and like we were a part of the discussion. It wasn't just coming out of nowhere trying to hit us. As for reactions from chapter leaders, it was a little bit hesitant, but just about anything that involves the IFC, chapter presidents always are hesitant. It's been kind of a long and trying road for previous boards to bring back the relationship that the chapters once had with the school. But it is improving, which is really pleasant to see. I've had a couple chapters reach out to me specifically about getting information and data about this study. And we have big goals of getting every chapter this upcoming year involved in the study. Because right now we have a couple, but it's still kind of in the early stages. And yeah, and so that's kind of the biggest thing is it's bringing students into the discussion, because chapter presidents have felt left out before. And as a board, obviously we represent them when talking to the school. And so we're always trying to bring them in. And it is a challenging task, but it's really big to have kind of be able to go, hey guys, like, if you do this, like if you get involved, you can have a very large impact on not only the current state of the Greek life, but the future as well. So.
Andrew, great. I have to emphasize one key word you said there, and that's relationships. The more and more that we as alumni, mentors, advisors, instructors start to develop more thoughtful and trusting relationships with our collegians, I really think we're going to be able to move this entire conversation into a very productive space. So you hit a key word for me, and that being relationships. So I have to thank both you and Mary for being here and sharing with our thoughts. It's indeed a pleasure to see somebody who is right now experiencing what Greek life is on campus. It really helps us all frame a better picture of what you're experiencing compared to what we have experienced. Steve, could you give us a little bit more insight about your team, the advisors, current supporters, and also I would love if you could speak a little bit more to how people can help support the Piazza Center or get involved if they'd be so interested in.
Yeah, thank you, Jody. Well, and again, we're young and we're just getting our feet wet with our projects, but our team is growing, and I'm very excited about the folks that we have involved. I already just mentioned at the top of the conversation that our learning project to prove learning in fraternities and sororities and all of the traditions that we have is being led by Dr. Cameron Beatty. Cameron was an NPHC president and again, member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And he leads the project with a growing kind of a powerhouse research team that is, again, for the first time ever in any literature anywhere, proving that fraternities produce authentic learning, which is so critical for campuses to really think about the investment in fraternities and sororities, for they're producing the #1 goal of our host institutions, right? Learning. And fraternities and sororities are producing authentic learning right alongside the academy. And so we're excited to produce some of this groundbreaking literature. And then our anticipated goal here is that it definitely gives campuses a reason to really invest heavily in creating safer fraternities and sororities, i.e. the prevention movement, which Jody and Andrew, how you just summarized that, it's relationship building. It's literally walking alongside students, not making decisions for them, but helping them. And so it's a different framework that we're coming from. And so it's so critical is that we need to invest more in our students and building those rich relationships like never before, which is Rob Teresi, which I already introduced. A couple of other highlights on our folks. Jenny Small. Jenny is at Brandeis University. She's leading a program around how our Jewish fraternities and sororities, which Penn State has a number of our Jewish fraternities and sororities, including our local Beta Sigma Beta fraternity, that has the roots deeply embedded in Jewish identity, and how that is actually also not in the literature. So again, another first for us is to talk about that and how campuses are supporting them, which is all over the news and all over hot topics. But we started this project 2 years ago. So of note that this is not just a reaction to what's happening in the conflict and the war in the Middle East in Israel, but our work to look at how we're supporting our Jewish fraternities and sororities. Again, a very diverse scholar pool. In the middle section here is our young talent. And we're excited that we're already having mentorship opportunities where we're taking young talent and we're connecting them with lead researchers. So that's another part of the center. And then the staffing model, Janie Baird was in the Prevention Research Center. We just stole her. She just started last week. So we're growing our staffing model and to better support our projects. So a number of things going on in the center. Again, for a brief amount of time, we're just highlighting a few of them: the Learning Project, the Prevention Project, Jewish Studies. We have some other significant goals and looking at how we're resourcing specifically traditions of fraternities and sororities. Because the Black Greek experience is different than the Asian Greek experience, that is different than the majority experience. So there's a lot of nuanced difference within the center. And as we build our capacity, we will be working towards those ends. So that's our team and a quick summary. We're advised by a growing advisory committee. So some national leaders, some student affairs leaders, some traditions of fraternity and sorority leaders. And so we have some expertise, content expertise that is guiding our work, giving us advice in those directions, including the CEO of the North American Interfraternity Conference, the CEO of the Panhellenic Conference, the past executive director of the National Panhellenic Conference. So some powerhouse thinkers and also some associations for student affairs leaders and vice presidential leadership that is part of our guidance group. Jim and Evelyn are part of that conversation. They just joined this year and are also part of that conversation. Jim and Evelyn also are, again, thoughtful advocates. They're traveling around college campuses and speaking still. And so they have a robust travel schedule, but they're also joining us and helping inspire some donor conversations. Which Jody, getting us into the donor space here, we want to really thank those that have sponsored, already mentioned Lambda Chi Alpha and Phi Gamma Delta fraternities for their major gifts that are really helping us build the capacity for that prevention work. Zeta Beta Tau fraternity, another $100,000 gift to the center to inspire our Jewish and support our Jewish scholarships, our scholar work, I should say. Just to highlight a few, your organization, Jody, has been very thoughtful, and a Panhellenic organization has given a gift nationally as well as locally, and most significantly is when students rallied in support of the center. And I had to say, alum gifts and Stephen's going to be talking with Pi Kappa Phi local alumni here in a second, but the local gifts are much more meaningful. Student gifts are much more meaningful. Yes, we want the big donors, right? We want those large organizational donors, but there's a lot of meaning when students are rallying in support of the center. So really appreciate that. And it's not the dollar amount, right? It's the fact that they're interested in supporting the center. So, if I may, and I would say for the folks on the call that have some capacity and or know folks in their networks to rally and support, and if this message is ringing for them and resonates, we really need to scale up our projects. And so again, we're young, we're just getting going, we're scratching the surface on some really important work that has never been explored before in the space of fraternity and sorority. So we have vetted our strategies. We literally took 2 to 3 years to vet those strategies. And we didn't come out of the gate and try things. We've literally spent a lot of time with focus groups, we spent a lot of time with the existing literature to make sure we would pinpoint exactly the things that we needed to do to create positive change. So with that, I would say we're ready to move and become a bigger center that has more impact. I already mentioned there's 800 fraternity sorority communities across the country. We'd love to be able to resource that at that level. We'd love to resource our own Penn State community with the support systems that Andrew was talking about and Mary was reflecting. So coming to where we're at in terms of we've raised, we're at the halfway mark. We've raised $4 million. Part of that $4 million is an important story that the trustees of our campus really invested in this project from the get-go, and also created a match which I believe we're the only match program of the entire campus right now, dollar for dollar, for support for the center. So yeah, the resources to be able to do this work and to grow our capacity to meet the ever-changing needs of our students that keep every 30 years kind of figuring out new and different ways, and to keep pace with that. So our overall goal is an $8 million self-sustaining research center that keeps pace with all the changes along the way. President Bendapudi, I would say one of her first decisions was to extend our matching program. So she extended it for 2 years when she took on her role. So I really appreciate her support for fraternities and sororities, her support for the center, really right out of the gate before really knowing much about us. And so important endorsements from trustees, from President Bendapudi, from I would say our current donors. And again, this is coming to the ask for you all on our call today is if this resonates with you, if you can talk this up amongst your network, your friends, your colleagues, your fraternity and sorority brothers and sisters. If you have the capacity and are interested in making a gift to the center, I would say the need that we have, and you saw those scholars and you saw our research fellows, we need more of those folks involved to build our capacity to do this work. And so that's where I would say our ask is to really fund those. It's akin to, and it's at a smaller level, thankfully, but it's akin to funding a faculty member in an academic department. It's akin to really, again, at much lower price tag, we're not asking for those dollars, but we're asking for that level, a type of support that is really looking at the experts here at Penn State, as well as nationally, that we're bringing into our projects and helping us fund their work. So that's the important capacity building needs that we have. So I mentioned this before, but our own Pi Kappa Phi chapter and our alums have rallied in support of the center with an amazing $80,000 commitment to the center. So I'm going to turn over to Steve Diorio and have Steve maybe share a little bit about the motivation that Pi Kappa Phi and their decision making in terms of supporting the center. So Steve, do you want to share a few thoughts?
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Thanks so much, and thanks to everybody who's on this call today. Steve, I think that the motivation for the chapter is essentially that it supports our mission to serve and lead. I mean, to be simply stated, personally, my motivation is, I mean, I have dear friends whose children were present when all this happened at Beta. I saw the impact, obviously, to the victim, to Tim himself, to his family. But I saw the residual effect to leaders who I respect of that chapter who wouldn't want to see that happen. I saw impacts to the families of the students who were also brothers there. And, clearly this sort of thing can be avoided, needs to be avoided, and it's futile to continue business as usual. And personally, we're not going to allow this to be business as usual at Pi Kappa Phi. And personally, I'm not going to let us be involved in things that we know can be prevented. So the mission of the Piazza Center really resonates with me because it's an educational opportunity, not only for our students, but for our alumni. We are challenged. There's a thinking out there I can see with some of the questions that are coming up. There's some concerns. There's an impression that fraternities are targeted at Penn State, that Penn State really isn't supportive of fraternities. But you can see through the commitment of the university to match our contribution and future contributions, you can see what that commitment actually is. And I would strongly disagree with anyone who feels as though they don't want to see it continue. I mean, I know personally they do. Through a program like this is what it's all about, but it's got to be different. Jody alluded to that earlier when she said that it's not the Penn State that she once knew. It's not, and fraternities aren't, and the society's not, right? So this is a bigger picture. Pi Kappa Phi played a leading role. I graduated in 1978. I started obviously in 1974. Thon Marathon, IFC dance marathons started out in the hub, right? And Pi Cap was an integral player in that and a leader. And look where it's gone today. Look what Thon is today. It's because of fraternities today. This problem that we're seeing is not a problem of Greek life. Alcohol abuse, substance abuse is not a problem just in Greek life. Hazing, it's not just a problem in Greek life. But Greek life can lead society out of this problem. So we can be leaders. So not only can the undergraduates learn great leadership skills, but our alumni can continue the great tradition that they started at Penn State by leading the country out of a problem. And I believe that that is instrumental in the research that is going to take place through the Piazza Center. And I think it's invaluable in terms of the educational program. So this is a bigger picture, and it's not, if fraternities went away, there's still going to be problems of alcohol abuse at Penn State. So it's not just us, and the university knows that, right? But we're a bigger player, but we have a role to play in this fight, and it's a fight, and it's hand-to-hand combat. So what I'm hoping is that the educational programming and the material that we're able to present to our alumni will let them see the fraternities are viable, but it's viable in a different way. Socialization is going to be an extremely important piece of Greek life because we're social fraternities, but it's not the only piece. And we need to communicate that to our undergraduates and their families so that they in turn feel confident to allow their students and their children to be a part of a leadership opportunity that is unprecedented and not present, in my opinion, anywhere in the university. So I applaud what you're doing. I thank you for what you're doing. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to contribute to this in some small way. And, my mission personally is to encourage our alumni to support this, and for other fraternities that are looking at this, and for other Greek members who are looking at this, it's real, and Penn State supports it.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. We do have time for some questions. So I have a couple in the chat already. So if you have something else that you are interested in mentioning, if you put them in the chat, that would be great. And Steve, if you are good, we could just start to tackle some of the questions there. I think there's one that's interesting that came up just recently, talking about really your findings and where they're going towards next steps in terms of our question comes with the term resolution. And I don't necessarily consider this a resolution, but more changing behaviors to support healthier relationships on campus as well as within organizations. Could you speak about some of your recent findings and how you've been applying them?
Yeah, so here's one quick example is students come in and they assume that everyone's drinking at this level. And so they will start to drink towards that level when the reality is the level is down here. And so highly effective prevention program is called social norming, which then accurately says this is actually where the watermark is versus where students assume it's at. And so there is a moment that fraternities and sororities have an undeserved reputation because the actual drinking is, and our findings are that it's down here. Some organizations may be up here, but that's not the entire community. And so we have a perceptual problem, right, that needs to be addressed. And it's actually, again, a science-based program that can actually reduce the number of drinks that students are trying to drink towards, especially for those first-year students that are looking at rolling on campus. That's an example. There are other examples of programming that when we engage students with highly effective facilitators, it changes their motivations and their attitudes towards some more pro-social behaviors that you mentioned, some more health and wellness activities. And so with that, we can, again, another strategy, bias intervention training, as an example, is highly effective, especially when paired with a professional and a peer. And as we built out the quality of those programs. So those are a couple of examples from our prevention data. Like I said, we're just getting going with our proving of learning, but our forecast here is that learning is occurring in fraternities and sororities, and we can document that. We can feed it back to students so they actually perform potentially even better in the classroom, as well as they're really well prepared for their internship, summer jobs, and most importantly, their career paths. Fraternity and sorority students are some of the students that, because of their level of engagement with each other and in ways that are typified by the concept of brotherhood and sisterhood, where they're supporting each other in all those facets of life, that's an immense amount of learning. Just being and it's hard work. I mean, if anyone's done it, it is hard work being a brother and sister sometimes. And so again, especially in today's environment, where students have a lot more perils than we've ever imagined 15 and 20, 30 years ago. So findings are coming, and we're producing more of them. We're basing it in solid research that a lot of our Penn State Prevention Research Center folks have already developed. And then we're applying it with colleges. And when I say applying it, we're literally working with professionals on college campuses to improve their programs and assess the heck out of it, and give them the data that they can then start to map towards what's successful in preventing harm, increasing wellness, increasing belonging, increasing leadership, increasing intervention. So we're increasing those pro behaviors and decreasing the hazardous drinking, hazing. So.
Thank you, Steve. Another question that's come up, and this one came up early on in the presentation, and I'd like to bring it up. It's part of my daily work with advising. So there is a feeling to some that may not be very, very close to what's going on at Penn State, that there's some unrest between particularly fraternities, feeling about the restrictions being placed by Penn State. Some, they have gone independent from the university. Several complain that Penn State wants to kill fraternities. What's going on? So I can speak a bit to this from my own experiences. Penn State does not want to kill fraternities or sororities. The sorority advisors were graciously welcomed by our president earlier this year for a lovely luncheon to discuss what our perceptions were of what's going on in campus. So that was a very, very welcoming conversation about how do we keep and grow a healthy Greek community. So I know from the very, very top, this conversation is happening. But maybe, Steve, you could speak a little bit to the relationship between the Piazza Center and Penn State, specifically in terms of how the Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life works, and that you two are relatively independent, yet you do support each other.
Yeah, thank you, Jody. So again, young center, we are just getting going with a lot of our projects and producing data. So please keep that in mind as we start to literally the semester, I would say, become much more of a opportunity for OFSL to say, here's some important data for, and as Andrew mentioned, we are looking at gaining the student voice in what policies are helping students make better decisions. We're feeding that to then OFSL, and it's up to OFSL to then offer changes, and not just OFSL, right? This is student affairs, I would say student affairs leaders and the like. And so we are, I would say, assessing our students. We're getting their voice involved in the conversation, and then we're turning around and feeding that to decision makers for them to make some critical decisions. We don't make the critical decisions, to be clear. We're not setting policies. We are providing the data that then highlights to say, hey, this is what students are saying. Here's what we know from national practice, because we're doing this not just at Penn State, folks. We're doing a little of this around campuses. We're also keeping an eye towards what's happening on a national level as well as a local level. And then it's up again to the administrations and folks to wrestle with that information, potentially make different decisions. I can tell you from a deep dive in the literature, and we just literally yesterday was a frantic day because we're authoring a book on hazing prevention, and the deadline was yesterday. And so a lot of final editing of that process. We know from that literature what the strategies are that bring positive change. To summarize them, increase relationships with students, increase relationships with chapters whenever possible. We've looked at the efficacy of amnesty policies. We've looked at the efficacy of some specific types of prevention programs. And so we're going to be offering those suggestions to our campus leaders and saying these are evidence-based practices. And we would highly encourage us to engage in evidence-based practices that can engineer a safer community that will thrive. And when I say thrive, it grows in numbers, it grows the chapters and their strength of their chapters, and makes them more sustainable, as well as safer. So we're just getting going, folks. And so excited about what the future looks like.
Well, getting going is the hard part. And I know there have been some questions about this presentation being for fundraising versus actually a presentation on all your research. And I think having spent literally the last 4 years in this space with you, Steve, I know that you were really starting so super small, and that you are now at a place where you are still gathering data and starting to work with those interpretations and start to help make policy. So it really is at a young stage, but it does cost money. And maybe you could clarify a little bit more that the fundraising that you're doing will be going to fund those research experts and professors to actually go out, collect the data. It's interviewing endless numbers of students. It's reaching out to different chapters, both at a national level and a local level, and understanding all the dynamics of what goes into Greek life today, and help them move forward into a healthier place. Maybe you could speak a little bit to that.
Right. Well, actually, Jody, I think you did a great job of just summarizing that in terms of all what goes into fraternities and sororities. I think the other unique challenge for fraternities and sororities, and I already mentioned it, we have unique traditions. And so from an equity standpoint, one of our values of Penn State is how do we equitably support our NPHC traditions, our multicultural traditions, our IFC and Pellenic traditions. So we have to hold that at the same time of looking at priorities. And I'd say one of our hot priorities is hazing prevention. It's the refounding story of this center in Tim Piazza and what happened in that space. So we are absolutely, that's one of our key programs. Again, learning and what learning is produced. How do these organizations support identity development, which is so key and critical, especially for our minoritized populations. So that's a vein of our work. And then I would say accountability, and how are we holding organizations accountability that increases relationships, doesn't sever relationships whenever possible. And really, I would say when you start to see how those three strategies then start to work together, we're going to see monumental change. And that's my prediction. And I would say for those that are coming to this call, knowing from a development standpoint and raising the support for the center, when these three activities start to coalesce and work together, there's a lot of synergy. And that's what we're striving for, is a support model for our fraternity sorority communities here. And when I say here, when Penn State can start to exercise these three things in concert, I think we can be the beacon on the hill for fraternity sorority communities across the US that are struggling with the exact same things we're struggling with. Because as Steven said, and folks, these are issues that are cuts across campuses. These are national issues that are affecting us, all college students all. And so, well, we're doing a both and, right? Here and nationally, and a close attention to what's going on nationally so we can bring it back home, and then also learn from that so we can be that beacon on the hill. So I guess and.
Yeah, a good question about providing research information for our listeners to perhaps use and share with people that aren't able to be here today to talk about what is actually happening. So Steve, I'm going to put that in your lap, and maybe you and we can work and make that a to-do to make that available in very digestible format, because I'm sure a full-fledged research paper might not be an ideal selling point. But I think that's a great question, is how can we share this information out in a really digestible place to improve advocacy. So thank you for the question, and we will definitely put a focus on that. One question that's come up in a couple different spaces, and it does again speak to the relationship between the Greek system and Penn State, but it is a question that many people do get frustrated with that, and that's regarding new membership recruitment, formerly known as Rush. And I say that because, again, this is not my Penn State. This is a younger set of individuals, Penn State, and there's a whole new set of terminology that is used around the conversation of joining a Greek organization. This work applies to all Greek organizations. There was a lovely question about the diversity of Greek organizations in Penn State, and there is a group of Greek affiliated organizations that are of color, and they are in this conversation with the Piazza Center. And Steve, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more to that, and then I can happily talk a little bit more about the recruitment process at Penn State.
Yeah, well, Jody, yeah, the traditions of fraternities and sororities are very complex. I'll say it that way. And we have scholars that are rooted in the different traditions. And so as an example, our Black Greek organizations, our Divine Nine organizations who perform intake, not recruitment, not rush, and that's a much different system that they have set up. It potentially has some ideal characteristics to it, and how they recruit members. I would say, so again, we have to be experts in all of the traditions, and we are. And so that's one of our pride points of, again, our commitment and our values of Penn State coming through, and how we approach this work, because we are noting all that difference. And we're working on projects that are unique and specific to the different traditions when possible. Again, that's a scaling issue, and that's a capacity issue. And so so I'll give you a practical example of that. We are working with campuses to say, hey, your hazing program can't be the same, because there's different nuanced issues that are different for our Black fraternities, that are different than our historically white fraternities, that are different than our Asian organizations, that are different than, and so what data do you have that points to the difference, so you can structure your programs to meet students' needs versus don't meet students' needs. And so we do not want to be part of programs that miss the target and waste students' time, and are highly ineffective, right? So that's an example of what we mean by equity and supporting different traditions, even within our prevention work. The learning project, as I mentioned, same things. Students are learning different things. They're learning, but they're learning different things, and we're going to talk about that, and we're going to celebrate those differences and hold them up as great examples for the immense, like I said, amount of learning, because I would say cutting across all the traditions is the concept of brotherhood and sisterhood. It looks a little differently, but there's, again, immense amount of learning across the board. So, and then I would think the question maybe embedded in here, and I'll just be speaking frankly, is around for our historically white fraternities and sororities deferred recruitment. And then we are a deferred recruitment campus, and that came out of the 2017 initiative to delay recruitment for some organizations. Some of those traditions were already delayed. They were already delayed to their sophomore year. Some of the campus are delaying it. We have looked at what the research is, which is inconclusive on either side of if deferred recruitment from a research standpoint is a policy that helps improve communities. We have data that suggests that it does, and we have some data that suggests it is benign. And so we have looked at how we would approach a study that would hold water by stakeholders. And we have not conducted that study because we're just getting going, A. B, we are already committed to some research that I already outlined for you. And to build a project that would hold literally credibility amongst stakeholders, it had to be a pretty big study. And we just don't have the bandwidth to do it. So a lot of people feel very strongly in their encampments right around this topic, and I deal with that. Not just the questions that have appeared maybe in our chat, but that's a national conversation as well. And so there's a lot of interest around this. There's a lot of opinions around this, but from a place of integrity to do research that would convince anyone or hold any credibility, that's going to take a monumental effort, and we just don't have the bandwidth to do that. So
I can add a bit into the recruitment on the Penn Health side. The conversation of when this process takes place and what is best for our students. I've had this conversation with the students, and like Steve said, the data coming in on a wider scale is inconclusive. So is it amongst our students. Some of our leadership and the sorority I advise really like it in the spring because it gave them a chance to get settled before they made this important decision, which I remind the collegians that I'm advising, this is a decision that you make with a commitment to life. It's not like you just do it for a couple of years and you graduate and it's gone. We are welcoming you into an organization for life. So again, I too see it on both sides. And for those of you that are, eager to see more change here, I really welcome you to become more involved in the Greek life. It is one of the spaces where you can not only help a young person grow, but you will find yourself growing as well. So if you are associated with a sorority or fraternity and want to start to see some changes that move in a positive direction, I really encourage you to go to those organizations, offer to advise, be a part of the group that I'm involved in. We have a group of the advisors for sororities. We collectively speak on a regular basis to help drive some changes that we see need to be taking place. It is 1 o'clock, and that is really the key cutoff time. And I know we have not addressed all the questions. Steve, do you have time for maybe 1 or 2 more? And if anybody wants to just stay on, I think maybe we could extend this another 10 more minutes. What's your thoughts?
yeah, absolutely.
An interesting question was talking about using Penn State's own neuroscience research center. And I think with Rob not being here, maybe you could also just tie in a little bit more of the Penn State resources that you are using to work on this.
Yeah. And this is the embarrassment of riches that Penn State has in terms of so many research centers and so many really great partnership opportunities. It's a little dizzying. I would say our fast friend and our main friend is the Prevention Research Center, the Edna Bennett Pierce Prevention Research Center. It is one of the juggernaut prevention areas in the country with over 40 faculty involved in that space. And it really keys into how we're partnering again with, and I already spoke to this, but how are we building out prevention practice within our student communities that bring positive change, that help students make really good decisions, that help set them up for intervening in each other's lives, i.e. sisterhood, brotherhood, and absolutely creates a safer experience, brings down hazardous drinking, brings down sexual violence, brings down hazing, and improves wellness, improves health, improves long-term health. And so that's all of that is, again, where our connection to those folks. I've talked to a bit with some faculty that are part of that center that also connect to the neuroscience fields. There's some intriguing conversations. And I could, again, get down to some rabbit holes, but there's some really amazing work that our neuroscience folks are doing, especially in stress management, especially in how drinking at a collegiate level, especially for the maturing process of the brain as it's developing in the prefrontal cortex that doesn't develop until 25, and how the perils of exposure to excessive drinking literally damages long-term effects and potentially can increase health hazards down the road. And so that's an example of we can advise students and help educate them to say, you might want to think about the level of drinking today and your stress level, because those two in combination, and your sleep, because those three things in combination can set you up for long-term health issues. and some other DNA work, specifically because students, I always say to students, if you're in a 100-person organization, there is most likely a percentage of students that already have a predisposition to alcohol disorder. And so if your central activities are around drinking, that's a hazard for those students. And you're not good for them and they're not good for you. And so there's some important, to the person's point, I would say, yes, there's a lot of great opportunities that we can partner with. The Edna Pierce Bennett Prevention Research Center in biobehavioral health is our go-to right now. As we can expand, we absolutely look forward to those conversations to expand with some other partnerships.
I'm going to finish up on one question. I think it's very specific, I think, to a bit State College, but I think we can put it out a little bit wider, and it ties what Andrew said about relationships. And it talks about how can the Greek community be better neighbors within their local community. And I think this is a really important place where not only do we have to engage with our Greek families on campus, but we also need to engage with the State College community. One of the problems that our young collegians are facing right now is space to live, and they're often forced to make space commitments much earlier than they would actually like. At the same time, we also have a space commitment on campus to gather and develop community. So if anybody would like to engage in that conversation, I'd be happy to do that offline. So the students at Penn State are also struggling with some issues that we all aren't even really thinking about. But to finish off with the question is, how are we expanding our research in the Piazza Center to be about not just the Greek life, but also Greek life embedded in communities such as State College? What do you see that developing to be?
Mm-hmm. So I'm taking that in two different ways, Jody. One is some of the work that we're doing in the space of prevention, in the space of learning and accountability is Greek life related, but it's also all student organizations really. And so it's really cuts across a lot of, it's larger than, right? And our title of Fraternity Sorority Research focuses and pinpoints fraternities and sororities, and it's also expansive outside of fraternities and sororities. So I just wanted to note that all of our projects have that property that we're pinpointing for fraternities and sororities and broader. Yes, and. So that's one thought. The second thought is related to, I would say, more of a community-minded aspect of fraternities and sororities, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So you kind of set me up. And if anyone wants to join for another hour, to talk about how fraternities and sororities are designed to be mini democracies, to advance democratic principles, to advance civic engagement, and to really set students on fire for a commitment to civic action. Whether that's voting, whether that's walking an elderly person across the street, or being better citizens in their local community, and or what they can do and to really live into what I would say a principle that fraternities and sororities have across all traditions, which is being engaged in community action and democratic action, civility, civic engagement. And so I would say if there's an outcome, if there's a punchline to this conversations, it's really helping students become leaders today so they can be leaders in their communities tomorrow.
Absolutely. We are running out of time, and we have taken a gracious amount of time from our attendees. Please consider contributing. Please join me in contributing. My husband and I are very much strong supporters and advocate of this program. We have 3 young adult children who have gone recently through the college experience and have had some positive and some very negative experiences in their life related to not only alcohol and substance use, but also related to the Greek organization. And what Steve's and his team are doing are going to be making very much so impactful changes. So we know he's at the beginning. It takes money at the beginning. So we can't stress enough how this opportunity is here right now for Penn State to match. So for every $1 you give, they get another $1 from the university. So please consider being on the foundation of what really, really will help bring the Greek community back into a solid space. I want to very much thank Mary and Andrew for being here, for giving us that student voice we don't often get to hear. So I know that taking time from your schedules is an effort as well. So thank you very much. Stephen, thank you so much for your contributions. I look forward to continually working with you as we also support the Piazza Center. And Steve as well, it's always great to hear what's happening at the Piazza Center and how things are progressing. If anybody has any other questions you want to pop into the chat, we will be reserving the chat and we will have someone from our volunteer organization responding to you directly and giving you hopefully even more thorough answers if we weren't able to cover everything in this conversation. This is not the end. I believe that there will be another Noontime Knowledge series in July, and it will be discussing the emerging and advanced technologies for agriculture and living systems. So please be sure to check your inboxes for that update. As of this point, this officially concludes our event for today. And again, thank you very much for being a part of today's conversation on Noontime Knowledge series.